んにちは、そしてこんばんは。私、リーカイと申します。そして本日も
皆さんおはようございます。
おはようございます。
こんばんは。私はタナシオジョンと申します。今週もどうぞよろしく
お願いいたします。はい。ですね、今日は we have two housekeeping things to go over. First thing is first. So, our first initial name for our podcast was Initial Reflection. Very much pun intended. And we moved that, changed it to what we call, pun intended again, call and response. Was that confusing? Was that confusing, John? Was it? Was it, John? I need feedback. I need feedback. But anyways, we changed it to call and response.
We changed it to call and response.
And the reason is, why was it, Johnny boy? Why is it?
So in music, there's a concept called call and response, which is a succession of two direct phrases where the second phrase is heard as a direct commentary on or in response to the first. And I thought this podcast or this act of reflecting on a book was kind of like that. So the book or the author is the call and our podcast would be the response.
I like that, John. You know,
Thank you.
I always wonder, where did all these ideas come from? Man, John is such a great philosopher and thinker. And so I want to thank you today in this podcast for coming up with such a good title. No, not title. Name for a podcast. Anyways.
Thank you.
Anyways, all right. So we have actually our second housekeeping is we have a very special guest who is in this call right now, and we would like to welcome her. Please. Oh, hello.
こんばんは。おやすみなさい。ただいま。
I like the spirit.
私はスーモーガアシです。よろしくお願いします。
よろしくお願いします。
アシュリーさんは今日all the way from where are you right now? Joining us?
Seattle, Washington.
Oh wow, that is amazing. But thank you for joining us from such a far place. We are very glad to have you today. I'm sure John is too, right?
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Ashley.
Well, thank you for joining us, Ashley. And thank you for reading the book with us. What were you going to say?
I was going to say thank you for letting me join.
Okay. You're welcome. Okay, so let's move on. Let's move on to the next point. Oh goodness, it is hot in here. So actually, we did say 2 housekeeping in the beginning, but actually there's 3. The third one is that we will be posting our book schedules in the description of this podcast and on Anchor, Spotify, and also YouTube. And so you can look at which books we'll read next week, the week after, and if you would like to, and you can read the books and join us that week. You don't have to prepare anything. You can kind of just hop on and come up, just discuss on the spot with us. Now we really welcome that, and we really look forward to if anyone is interested in doing that. It'll make this space a much happier place. So please take a look at the calendar. It's a Google Calendar, and we will post it on the social media I just mentioned. Okay, so this week, we read a book, and I would like John to take it from now.
Likai said we had 3 housekeepings, but actually we had 4. The fourth one is that from this week, we're gonna change our structure of this podcast. Previously, we went through each chapter of the entire book, and as we went along, we shared our thoughts. But for this week, and going on, we're gonna go over the entire summary of the book, and then after that, we're gonna reflect on it. And then after reflecting on it, we're gonna hopefully have some discussions based on the questions that come up throughout the book. So the book we read this week was Digital Minimalism by Cal Newport, who is a Provost Distinguished Associate Professor of Computer Science at Georgetown University. And a Provost Distinguished Associate Professor receives extraordinary merits from their exceptional work for up to 5 years. And the main theme of the book revolves around having a philosophy of being more aware and intentional with our use of social media and other digital technologies, which is where he coins the phrase digital minimalism. His minimalistic or essentialistic approach to digital technology use spreads into other areas of our lives and points us in the direction of being more intentional as a whole. So the thing that's scary about mindless social media and digital technology use is that it creates a very lopsided relationship between you and the companies that provide you the service. The more time you spend on the platform, the more money they make. So it's natural for these companies to design their services in a way that gets you hooked by tapping into 2 of our primitive instincts, which are 1, intermittent gratification, and 2, social approval. So without us even being aware of it, our time and attention is seeping away from us, only to be found in one of the regrets we may face on our deathbeds. Now, this book isn't trying to totally reject social media and digital technologies, but instead suggests us to use these technologies in a way that complements our core values in life. As a method of mitigating the distractions of social media and digital technology use, Cal Newport introduces a method called the digital declutter. The digital declutter, in a nutshell, is, number 1, a process in which you put aside a 30-day period where you will take a break from all the optional technologies in your life. And what he means here by optional are the things that aren't essential for work and the things that you normally use during your free time. And number 2, during the 30 days, you explore, reflect, and rediscover the activities and things that you find satisfying and meaningful to you. And number 3, at the end of the break, you reintroduce the optional technologies that pass these 3 key questions, which, number 1, are, does this technology directly support something that I deeply value? And if it passes this question, the next question you ask is this technology the best way to support this value? And if it passes this, the last question you ask is, how am I going to use this technology going forward to maximize its value and minimize its harms? And in this last process, you write out a specific guide to how you will be using these optional technologies called the operation procedure, and put it somewhere you can see it to remind yourself every day. Cal also introduces several principles that help us establish ourselves on this path of digital minimalism. And the first one is to spend time alone. Now, during the 30-day detox, blocks of free time will suddenly appear in front of us. And normally we would resort to digital technologies to fill in this void, but the point of the detox is not only to avoid the use of optional devices and services, but to make time to sit with our own thoughts. Many of the great thinkers from Friedrich Nietzsche, Henry Thoreau, and Abraham Lincoln all attributed their great work to this solitary time that they gave themselves to sit with their thoughts without any external inputs. And What's meant here by external inputs are the products of other people's thoughts, like books, music, newspapers, movies, and conversations. And having the time to think about what your thoughts have to say and structuring your days accordingly is what leads to a more intentional and meaningful life. As more often than not, if we listen carefully enough to our thoughts, they present us with things in our lives that require our urgent attention. The second principle that Cal introduces is don't click like, because clicking on the like button is a form of communication that is only worth one bit of information about the state of a sender to its receiver. And he says that this type of communication is a disgrace to our social processing machine, since we can read subtle and complex analog cues in offline communication, and is like towing a Ferrari behind a mule. And he instead reinforces the idea that a conversation is the only method of communication that counts towards establishing or maintaining a relationship. And anything textual or non-interactive like email, texting, and social media don't count as conversation and should be instead categorized as mere connections. He ends by pointing out how humans have managed to maintain rich and fulfilling social lives for our entire history without needing the ability to send a few bits of information each month to people we knew briefly in high school. The last major principle that Cal brings up is to reclaim our leisure. With the newly made free time, he proposes to follow 3 leisure lessons. Number 1 is to prioritize demanding activity over passive consumption. As an early English novelist, Arnold Bennett, says, one of the chief things which my typical man has to learn is that the mental faculties are capable of continuous and hard activity. They do not tire like an arm or leg. All they want is change, not rest, except in sleep. And the second lesson is to use skills to produce valuable things in the physical world. As Doctor of Political Philosophy at the University of Chicago, Matthew Crawford, mentions, one way to understand the exploding popularity of social media platforms in recent years is that they offer a substitute source of aggrandizement, which is the increase of power or reputation of something, usually describing some sort of exaggeration, which are porous substitutes for recognition generated by handicraft, as they're not backed by the hard-won skill required to attain the infallible judgment of physical reality and come around instead as the boasts of a boy. So craft allows an escape from this shallowness and provides instead a deeper source of pride. And the third lesson is to seek activities that require real-world structured social interactions. As Cal says, there's a sensory and social richness to real-world encounters that's largely lost in virtual connections. So spending time with your World of Warcraft clan doesn't qualify. And paradoxically, the more structure there is for social interaction, the more sense of belonging and freedom of expression you will have. So ideally, we would replace our passive forms of leisure like watching Netflix, television, surfing the internet, playing video games, and spending long hours at the bar with high-quality leisure like fixing the bathroom fan, building a bunk bed, improving your garden ecosystem, joining or starting local sports, or maybe spending more time in your side hustle. To conclude, Cal Newport says, digital minimalism doesn't reject the innovations of the internet age, but instead rejects the way so many people currently engage with these tools. The key to sustained success with digital minimalism is understanding and accepting that it's not really about technology, but instead more about the quality of your life, and using technology to our advantages instead of it being the other way around.
So we're gonna now move on to the reflection of the book, and I think also here, I guess this will be your like 5th bookkeeping, or not bookkeeping, housekeeping. We're gonna, I mean, it's not a really big deal, but we'll go one by one and talk about we'll have a rating, a numerical value to rate the book first out of 10, and then we'll kind of comment on the book in a general format, and then more specific questions will happen, I guess, later in the Q&A. And I guess I can start first. For me, it was 7 out of 10. Actually, I might even lower it, because 6 out of 10. I realized that if I put this as 7 out of 10, there's not much variance for the better books in the future. A 6. And then so the reason is because I tend to be more on the conservative end of using technology, or I should say I use technology. I use computers and laptops a lot of time, but I think I was good at not letting likes or the social attraction of social media and all that features to get the better of me, because I kind of felt weird kind of basing my reputation, my self-confidence on likes and numbers and stuff like that. So I had that tendency from before, and I guess there wasn't much to gain out of it. Like the 30-day declutter is also like it's a good process for I'm sure a lot of people, but I think it wouldn't be as beneficial for me because my starting point is already low. But some tips I use when I try to minimize the digitalness in my life. One thing is I know Instagram is pretty addictive to me, and so I started unfollowing a lot of different people or clubs or organizations, not unfollow, because that would mean like unfriending, but it would be muting all of them. And if for those that don't know, muting would make you still connected to that person. You can still message and see their profile, but you won't see their notifications or their feeds on your home feed, news feed anymore, and their stories won't pop up anymore. You can still watch them, but they just won't be right in your face. So that has made me feel less attracted to social media, or Instagram in this case. And then I did that like a couple months ago. I started doing that a couple months ago, and I naturally don't look at Instagram anymore. So one thing about the declutter thing, about 30-day, kind of just cut the cord right away or unplug, or it's like it might work for some people, but for me what's helpful was to gradually disconnect from the technology, and muting on Instagram was one of them. And you can do the same thing on LinkedIn. You can unfollow people. You can also put all the apps into one page. Oh, another thing about the newer iOS is that you can remove the app's icon from the home screen without actually uninstalling it. And so you might not see it when you open the screen, but let's say if you remove the Uber app from your home screen, you won't see it day to day, but if you go out and if you need an Uber, you can do like a search on your phone and say search Uber app on my iPhone. It'll still pop up and be in an installed format, so you can use it immediately. These are like two main things on my iPhone that I do a lot. Oh, and then do not disturb is pretty much on 24/7. So I am looking at my notifications on my own term, my own convenience, and when I feel like I want to, not because I'm forced to or pressured to, but because of all those reasons. I mean, not reasons, but those are things. But all the reasons I talked about before made me rate the book as 6 out of 10. ということで、ジョン君。
I rated this book pretty high at 8.5 out of 10. This was because I used to be a heavy digital technology social media user myself. So reading this book was really eye-opening and calibrating in a sense to, like said in the book, like to what I really value. Actually, before reading this book, I also saw some talks by Cal Newport on TED Talks or like just interviews, and I was influenced already and try to implement some of the techniques, but it was pretty loose. So Instagram came back into my life, and I would find myself spending countless hours on my phone or just digital stuff like mindlessly. So reading this was kind of like a refresher, reminder, and an upgrade to my relationship with digital technology and media use. And it was especially relevant for me because I use social media to connect with potential clients and people I can work with, and especially in the context of not having similar people professionally around my social sphere. Using social media and other tools was pretty essential for me. So it was pretty difficult to divide my personal social media use versus professional social media use. So, but as this book suggested, it's important to make each digital technology, it's important to tweak them in a way that makes you use it only intentionally. And yeah, so that philosophy added to my so-called operation procedure. So what I do now is I don't have my phone in my room. I put it in the dining room, so I can't even think about it or I can't even see it anywhere near me. I also have no apps on my screen. My friends call me weird for doing this, but that's just what I need to do. Like Likai, my phone's always on do not disturb. And lastly, I scheduled my so-called low quality leisures. So I use social media once a week when I play video games with a friend, which is also another scheduling of low quality leisure. So within that 3-hour time span, I can use social media as much as I want, and I can play games. So it kind of quenches the thirst for that type of activity. And after understanding that using social media intentionally only to connect with people that I find interesting or to post work, I figured that I don't really need to do that 24/7. So that's how I scheduled it into that once a week time frame. And lastly, regarding the chapter about don't click like, I was kind of against it at first because I've made connections with who are now important people in my life, like clients and close friends, through social media that started from the act of liking and commenting on each other's posts. So in that sense, I'm kind of on the opposite side of Cal Newport when he says to totally reject liking and commenting just because it's a 1-bit form of communication. Which, yeah, I guess I would love to hear your opinions on too. But yeah, that was my overall reflection of the book.
I have one thing to add. Like, I think the don't click like is might be, I know people that scroll through Instagram and or any social media, and they like almost every post that's been made. So it's kind of like scroll, double tap, scroll, double tap, scroll, double tap. And I'm not saying, I don't know if that's good or bad, but I think that's what Cal is kind of targeting, where it's like mindlessly liking. In your case, if it's if what you're liking is leading to connections, I think that's the whole point of digital minimalism. I think it's like to be intentional and if it's making you new connections, you're using it as a tool to get to be, it's not the other way around, the media using you. So like, I know he's an author, so he has to have a stance and say like be assertive and say don't do something, but in this case I think you kind of look at it at your own situation, see if it's benefiting. Just like John's case, it'll be a special edge case. So and Ashley, do you want to go?
Yeah, my rating was a 7.5 out of 10. The main reason was in the beginning I was pretty disappointed with the book because it was less about tips and tricks, and to me it was somewhat repetitive for the parts I feel like I didn't need to hear. And I saw a reviewer comment on the book and saying how this was more about asceticism and rather than minimalism, so like more about practices and not like tips and tricks on how to have a life of that has less noise from the world. But when you look at it through the lens of it being like a self-discipline and a practice that you have to implement yourself, I think it is very, it can be very helpful for those that need it. And so the main reason why I didn't really like it was because, why it didn't relate to me is because I didn't really grow up with a lot of technology and all of this kind of noise. And even when I did have access to these resources or like social media and technology, I didn't adopt those behaviors where I became very addicted to them. So that's why I didn't feel like it really resonated with me. But and I'm thankful for that though, because this lifestyle has given me space to think, understand myself, and make connections with people. Conversations that matter. And so some ways that I do that, even with having technology, would be to just limit what I have on my phone, having minimal notifications, having my phone on Do Not Disturb, just like you guys, trying to clear out my inboxes, and then unfollowing people that I don't need to see, or pages that I don't need to see, and also trying to make sure that I keep up with people and schedule certain times to respond to messages throughout the day, or once or twice a day. But a few things I did like about this book was I really did appreciate how Cal discussed a lot of ways that we can live our lives and reconnect with ourselves and our values to improve our quality of life. I think especially for those who might be very anxious, maybe because of the amount of social media or the amount of time they're not spending in silence, listening to themselves speak, or just being outside in the world, I would definitely recommend this book for them. There's a lot of useful examples that Cal has provided for us.
Can I add something? Like in the I think in the beginning you said that you thought it was more like tips and tricks, but it was more like about lifestyle and how to live your life and like reconnect with your values, right? And I think that's a good point to bring up, because I realized that a lot of lifestyle hacks are presented, like these articles or videos that say like 7 most important lifestyle hacks that you'll need to implement today. Do you clickbaity kind of titles and watch it? If you watch them, they're practical, right? They're like implementable. You can do it today if you want to. But what I like about Cal is it's more about concept and theory, theory, concept, and belief. It's about understanding it with your mind rather than following random, or not random, but like following, more external actions. And there's I think it's the Atomic Habits. Inside in that book, it talks about the belief system versus habits, versus habits. And he says you need to crack the belief system first. You need to be able to say there's a difference between I'm trying to stop smoking versus I'm not a smoker, and that's like a subtle but really huge difference. Where if you say I'm trying not to, you're saying like I'm still a smoker, but I'm trying to stay away from it. Whereas if I'm not a smoker, it's I just don't do it. And so if you translate that to another example, it's like I'm a healthy person. It's not like I'm trying to stay fit. Like I'm a healthy person, so I'm not gonna eat those junk food, and I'm gonna go take a walk outside and today for So if you understand the mechanism or the background of first of all, like why it's a negative influence on you and how it could be addictive and how they're exploiting, as John mentioned earlier, about the social approval and intermittent gratification and how you crave that. If you understand that, and take a step back and then like be aware of your day-to-day reactions, because it's not actions anymore, it's like reactions. And that's what I liked about Cal's or like breakdown of his idea.
Yeah, most of the examples he provides are kind of like they can be used as guidance, but he's not saying, and he provides also examples of how these habits can be harmful to people, but he's not necessarily condoning anything. He's allowing a lot of flexibility for you as long as you have the discipline to implement a lifestyle where that's best for you. Like he himself doesn't have any social media. He does have a website, but when I was watching one of his radio shows, he wasn't really talking negatively about these things, but for when people are using them in a way that's harming their relationships around them, then that's when it becomes an issue that he wants you to look at.
Yeah, so in that sense, I think he was really effective in his way of using anecdotes or reflections of the people who actually went through the digital declutter, or those that implemented, for example, high quality leisure instead of low quality leisure. And the responses made it more somewhat of convincing. Like, it was a first person response to these things instead of like it being a fad in a way, not a fashion, but it was more like their identities changing and their motivations and intentions were, you can see it reflected in how they responded. So a series of that really was effective in conveying what he wanted to do through this book, I think.
No. And actually, one of your points is about scheduling some time to respond to messages, and I think you mentioned about scheduling a personal office hour, and that means dedicating maybe like a couple hours in a time slot every week. So Saturday, like for example Saturday evening, where you will use that time to connect with people, not texting like or the communications he's talking about, but the connect more in person, virtual video calls and normal calls. And I think I want to start implementing that in my life, where like Saturday evenings will be more for friends and family, especially with the remote situation. And then making it systematic, I thought it's a pretty important thing about staying connected with people, is about like having a reminder or knowing when you last talked to that person, call that person, and having an actual system reminder to tell you, hey, you've talked to this person 4 weeks ago. Maybe you should schedule another one soon. And that sounds kind of like maybe like cold-hearted, because it's like, hey, you should be you should be wanting to talk or thinking about talking without any reminders. But I think that doesn't work out. Usually, like relationships kind of fade away, especially if you're far away for long distance. But gyakuni, like if you use reminders, I feel like it's more of a effort on my end to make this relationship work, even in this kind of situation. So office hour, systemizing the office hour with different people, like cycling them with different people, I think is a pretty practical, useful thing that I will keep doing.
I think that really goes along what he was talking about, how you're utilizing technology instead to promote the values in your life, instead of it being a cold-hearted method of just maintaining shallow relationships. So I think that's cool to do.
So did you guys have any other reflections before we move on to Q&A? Sounds good. Okay, so the next section will be Q&A, and in this section we will talk or ask each other questions that we have prepared for beforehand. And but for this week we will focus on one question, and John will be asking that question.
Okay, so my question comes from the segment where Cal talked about introducing high leisure activities into our lives. For most of the case studies and anecdotes that he used for this segment, he used people who were financially independent, or so-called FIs. And these type of people are people who have managed to construct a system where they didn't have to work. So their money made them enough money to have a sustainable life. So most of their time is pretty much free time. And he used these people to show how high leisure activities can be beneficial for people who have free time. But my question was, what about for those who only have free time after working long hours? So my assumption was, for those who worked long hours, it would be pretty difficult to try to tackle the so-called high-quality leisures. So just to briefly remind ourselves what high-quality leisures are, these are things that revolve around challenging and demanding tasks, like building or fixing or improving things around your life, particularly tangible and things in the real world, and if possible, something social, because all of these tend to improve our well-being and overall quality of life. So yeah, my question goes back to asking, does the implementation of high-quality leisure still provide benefits to those who have full-time jobs?
I can talk a little bit about this from my experience. And in response to that, I would say no. High quality leisure would not or should not be excluded to only those who are financially independent. A lot of these principles that came from the anecdotes and the examples that Cal gave was can be applied to anyone, and even if they're applied in small ways. I know that people who aren't financially independent may have less free time on their hands, depending on what they're doing, and maybe that free time is not as much free time as you would like. Personally, I know that as a student, I was working out, studying a lot, so I didn't have time to do things, even like bake or cook, simple things like that I really wanted to do. So I know it's hard to find a balance or a discipline, that discipline between working and also having leisure, but I don't think it's excluded to financially dependent people, and mainly because I think that these high quality leisures can provide clarity and meaning for your life overall, and if you can create a lifestyle where you put those things first, then that becomes like a base for the rest of your life, or like a base of the quality of life that you have, whether you're still studying, whether you're trying to find create a career for yourself, or once you are individually financially independent, because minimalism is generally speaking is to be concerned about not spending time on what's really important and what's key. It's about spending time on what's really important and what's key to your life. And so I would encourage people to find these times of high quality leisure, because it's going to add to your career or to your own knowledge, to your experiences, and build you to become the person that you want to be. And yeah.
Yeah. I want to add to that using one of the ideas that was discussed in the book about Thoreau's new economics, like life principle. And so the principle is about using life as the unit, or the unit to calculate cost or the opportunity cost in your life. So when you do one activity, like how much life units do you spend on it? And then instead of like the typical units would be like time, money, like happiness, and so on and so forth. Like maybe like so instead of that, you use life. And for me, I want to spend my life tokens on learning and being curious and like learning, practicing new skills. And I'm not sure why. I just kind of had this tendency from before, and I think I'm lucky. I'm lucky to have this natural inclination, and for the following reason, I think curiosity, or like this interest in learning, leads to high quality leisure, which then leads to financial independence, which is what the question is about. And so I'll explain a little bit. Curiosity and interest in learning is relevant and important because high quality leisures, like John talked about, included building, fixing, improving things, or producing or outputting something into the world or out to the world. And then in order to do that, you usually need to input, as in learn, get better, practice, gain some input or knowledge in order to process it in your own mind or body or whatever, and then produce it. And then so without inputting, outputting could be difficult, or the level could be low. And so I say lucky because since I already or at least I try to fill my time with practice or learning, naturally when I want to produce, it can be, I'm not saying I'm better than everyone else, but because I'm not saying I'm better than anyone else, but I think it can be helpful when I'm producing something. And then so by giving yourself by using or by doing high quality leisure, you're actually giving yourself opportunities to add value to this world, which I mentioned, right? But that is an interesting part because that's what leads to financial independence in the way that because you're putting something out into the world, you give yourself opportunity to not only add value, but monetize that value, monetize what you output. And so if you can monetize, you naturally lead to financial independence. And so, that's why like side hustles tend to be, I think, very good, high quality leisures. And that's what I wanted to add.
So, yeah, after listening to what you both had to say, it really seems like it boils down to your identity and your intention. So, for example, for people who just want to maintain their current status or current level of wealth or just comfort, it will be natural for them to just go along with their day, come home from work and relax in a sense. While, for example, like Likai, you said you're intrinsically motivated to be curious and learn and improve or produce things. So your identity is trying to add some sort of value into the world. And for intentions or identities like that, it's natural for you to spend your free time into watching documentaries, reading books, and just trying to get yourself educated or trying to process the inputs and formulating it into outputs. So, yeah, it really seems like it comes down to the root. And yeah, so it's like to kind of like sum up the entire message of the book. It's like digital minimalism doesn't really only give you this free time through not using social media or digital technology devices, but it's more of like a method that gives an opportunity for us, especially us who grew up with these technologies, to take a step back and see why and how we're using these technologies, and with the free time that's made from this action, take another step back to see what you want to use these time. What and how you want to use this time. So, yeah, as a whole, it feels like the book really wants to make us be more intentional, not just in the use of social media or technology use, but just time and life in general.
You know what other book talked about intention? Yeah, you guessed it. Influence. Oh, wait, actually, another one, David and Goliath. Oh, okay. I wonder if next week will be about intentions too. But before I keep joking, I actually have one more thing to say, which I forgot to mention. Was that I don't think I'm the only one that's intrinsically motivated or to learn or be curious about the world. I think everyone is, or else I don't think we're humans. Like, we're naturally inclined to be interested, and that's how we learn to know about the world and, in a sense, exploit it to our own advantage. And so I think that's how humans survived too. Like, in an evolutionary sense, like, you gotta know how a fire works so that it works to kill or cook or whatever. And another thing I wanted to say is that, like, if you want to, I don't mean it try to mean it like competitive sense, but like, if you want to be ahead of people, or if you want to do something unique or special and be valued higher, I believe, I'm not saying I am, but I believe doing something not many people are doing is going to give you that value or special or advantage, right? Being ahead. And so if our natural tendency is to be passively consuming, high quality leisure is such a simple, it might be difficult, but a simple way to get ahead of people. And so by that you can start up like your own company, and you can, like I talked about already, you can make that your side hustle, side income, and get ahead, be financially independent, and do whatever you want to do. And so I just put it in my notes as people don't do theory, but it's just my own idea that the fewer people do it, the more special or advantage you kind of get out of it. I think, just naturally, because no one's doing it. Those are the last 2 points I wanted to add. But if there's nothing else, I think that concludes our podcast this week with Cal Newport's Digital Minimalism. It was a very fun read, and I have read. I really enjoyed this because of how Cal broke down his ideas into very digestible sections and bullet points. And I've read other books written by him, and they're all very powerful self-help books. So if you are really interested, I highly recommend you to read those other books. I'm sure the podcast will touch on those books in the future as well. So be sure to check our calendar. But also, if you have any books that you're interested in reading with us, please feel free to tell us about that too. And I would like to thank Ashley again for joining us this week. Thank you for your input, and thank you for reading with us. We have enjoyed it very much doing this podcast with you. I'm sure I have. I don't know, John, have you?
I have, but...
Okay.
Are you sure, okay?
No, I am. Well, actually, did you enjoy it?
Well, yeah, I did, but John, did you?
I guess we'll find out in the next episode.
I like that segue. All right. Well, thank you everyone for listening again, and please stay safe. Okay.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.